The Garden of Gethsemane was a small grove at the bottom of the Mount of Olives. In ancient times, it was a mill for pressing olives and producing olive oil. Jesus went there to pray before his scourging and crucifixion. Now, there were many times that Jesus found a private and a quiet place to pray, but this place was different. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus was seeking peace for himself, and he was seeking peace at the oil press, because he was about to experience and endure a pressing like no man had ever experienced before. So Jesus is fully God and fully man. And in the garden, Jesus found himself wrestling with his flesh. He was wrestling with his humanness, if that's a word. He was deeply sorrowful, even unto death, and he prayed so heavy and so hard that he began to sweat blood. He asked his closest friends to watch his back and to look out for him while he poured his heart out to God, but they went to sleep. And we can relate to that because in tough times, I know I reached out to my closest friends and they'll tell me they're praying, or sometimes they'll send a prayer emoji. But after that, I still felt alone. I still felt the heaviness of the situation. And so when Jesus got up from his knees and he went to his disciples, the closest people to him, and he asked them, watch and pray, wait for me, look out for me. And Jesus said this very specifically. He told them to watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. And Jesus didn't say that just to rebuke them. He didn't say that to give them a pow pow. He said it because he understood that they were human. And he said it because he was also having a human moment. And so when Jesus was praying in the garden, he was there because he was struggling with the temptation of foregoing the cross. He wanted to forego the scourging, the embarrassment, the shame, the death. His flesh did not want to surrender to his demise. And so in that moment, Jesus was weak. And I know we don't think about Jesus like that, but in that moment, Jesus was weak. And he had those moments that we have, the why me, the why do I have to experience this? And just like a human, he wanted to preserve himself. And isn't that just like us? We want to self-preserve. We want to self-preserve ourselves from pain, from embarrassment, from abandonment, from persecution of any type. You fill in the blanks. And Jesus said this to the Father. He said, if it's possible for you to take away this cup from me, but if not, let your will be done. And the cup that Jesus was pertaining to, is talking about, is the cup of bitterness. It's the cup of scourging. It's the cup of accusation. It's the cup of the crucifixion. It's the cup of suffering as we know it. And Jesus was about to drink all of it. So here we have Jesus, who is also God. And the Spirit of God inside of him was giving him the strength that he needed to surrender himself to the cross. And this is why Jesus ended the sentence with, your will be done, not mine. Father, let your will be done, not mine. And has that been your prayer lately? Have you prayed the prayer, Father, let your will be done, not mine? Or are you struggling to preserve yourself? Jesus found the disciples asleep 3 times. 3 times he found them sleeping. And he told them to sit, to watch, to stay awake, to follow my example. Why? Because the disciples were preserving themselves. They were getting a little rest. They were getting a little sleep eye. And while they were getting a little rest, they didn't understand why Jesus kept coming back asking them to stay awake. And so one of the times when Jesus found them asleep, he said, come on, my betrayer is here. And so the disciples were asleep. And because they weren't watching, the betrayer came in, Judas in this situation. The betrayer came in. And so I hope you catch this. When we are too busy preserving ourselves, preserving our time, preserving our energy, we are still getting betrayed. We are still not paying attention to what is going on around us when we're so busy trying to preserve ourselves. And in the end, we still have to surrender anyway. And so maybe you were like me, you were disillusioned with the Christian life. Oh, if I give my life to Jesus, everything is going to be good. I'm not going to experience any pain. I'm not going to have to surrender anything because Jesus he just wiped it all away. Baby Jesus, nicey, 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 nicey. And like me, you were totally wrong. And so I struggled with years to submit myself to God because I wanted to preserve myself. I don't want to surrender my all to God. And if Jesus would had forwent the cross, then if Jesus would have forwent the cross, then there would be I don't know, where would we be? We would have no bridge. We would have no way to get to God if Jesus would have skipped out on the cross. Like, you know what? I'm God. I'm going back to where I came from. That would have had so many consequences for us. And I don't think we realized that in that moment where Jesus was in the garden, because he was wrestling with a choice. He was wrestling with the choice of submission. Should I give my life to, should I die or should I just go back to where I was? And in that instant, Jesus chose us. He chose you and I. He made a choice to surrender his life, to surrender his all, and to give his life for you and I. And so now we have to learn from his example, and we have two options. We could either allow our situations, our trials, the hard times that we go through to depress us, and if we become depressed, then once again, we're preserving ourselves, and there's nothing much that really comes out of depression. Or we can have the second option, which is we could go through the pressing like the olive, and we can allow that to produce something that God could use. And that can produce character in us. It could produce joy in us. Even in the hardest moments, situations can still produce joy. But at the end of it all, it could produce a story, a testimony that we could tell somebody else for the glory of God. And so it's okay to wrestle with your feelings. Jesus teaches us that in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's okay to wrestle with your feelings, but it's not okay to surrender to them. And instead, we should surrender our total will to God.